Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, what is the value for Raiders running back Josh Jacobs, not only to the team, but also to the rest of the league? We'll talk about that plus a whole lot more on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for June 12th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And, of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, we do appreciate it. And we appreciate my guy, Ari, who puts a lot of work in to get us up on YouTube each and every day. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up on Twitter as well at your boy Q254. And the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, if you want to get something in on the show, you could do that, either a call or a text, 707-654-4693. As a matter of fact, those calls and texts will come up in segment number 3 of today's show. Segment number 2, we'll talk about Josh Jacobs. We'll talk about his value, as right now he's currently holding the franchise tag with the Raiders. It's about $10 million, a little bit over $10 million. He hasn't signed it yet, and he put out a cryptic tweet over the weekend that definitely had to do with the running back position and the fact that he's trying to get that long-term deal done with the Silver and Black, not just for him, but running backs in general. We'll talk about that, kind of compare and contrast him to another running back who's out there and available that's very similar to Josh Jacobs. So, and he's a available free agent as well. All that will come up. A lot of running back talk in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes gathered over the weekend. And I'll tell you right now, it's a slow time of year because it's mid-June, but it was a really busy weekend in Las Vegas. I'll explain all that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. It's brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnToday to get started. I'll tell you more about them coming up at the end of segment number 1. But let's go ahead and jump into the news and notes, kind of what gathered over the weekend. And one of the big events that happened over the weekend was the Von Miller Pass Rush Summit, the 7th annual. There was plenty of Raiders in attendance. There's plenty of players in general. If you follow me on Twitter at your boy Q254, I actually tweeted out a picture of all the guys that were there. But Max Crosby was in attendance. He's been there multiple years. Matthew Butler, Adam Butler, and Adam Plant Jr. were all there from the Silver and Black. But other across the league, Micah Parsons, Cam Jordan, Nolan Smith, the rookie, Bobby Wagner, the linebacker, going back to Seattle. He was there. And like I said, a whole slew of others were at this Pass Rush Summit. But Von Miller let it be known that this is going to be the last year. It's actually the Von Miller Pass Rush Summit. He let it be known why he actually does this each and every year, and the fact that he tries to give back to the rest of the guys across the league that are edge rushers, that are pass rushers, that are trying to get to the quarterback and trying to give them the tools of the trade, just trying to make them better at what they do. And, I got in a few minutes to be able to hear Max Crosby explain it to some of the younger guys and Cam Jordan explain it to some of the younger guys, but really Von Miller holding court and explaining to everybody. And rookie Nolan Smith was there. He's the Eagles. They picked him up at the end of the first round of the past draft. We talked about Nolan Smith quite a bit leading into the whole draft process, and just thought that he was one of those guys that gets it, has a good head on his shoulders. Man, he was there asking so many questions to Von Miller, and it was great to be able to hear a young dude just getting into the league asking so many questions. It just shows how much he wants to be great. And again, Max Crosby out there shows how much he wants to be great. Not only was he giving some of the tricks and trades, some of the tools that he uses, but also the fact that he's out there learning as well on a Saturday afternoon in Vegas in June, right? He doesn't have to be out there. He's been doing mandatory minicamp. They got OTAs. They got one more week of OTAs, but he was out there anyway, just trying to sharpen up his tools. And so it's great to see that. And next year, Max Crosby's going to have a lot to do with this. I would not be surprised if this is the Max Crosby Pass Rush Summit next year. Von Miller said this will be the last year that his name will be on it, but he called Max Crosby Mr. Las Vegas. Said, you got Max Crosby here. We got a camp in Las Vegas. He is Mr. Las Vegas. So he's going to be a major part of that. And it just kind of lets you know the respect that the league has for Max Crosby and all that he's done. And just think about what he has done as a guy that was selected in the 4th round, worked his tail off. I always think back to Hard Knocks and the fact that he was so angry that he broke his hand and he went back into the locker room and taped his hand up and then came back out there and he just wanted to make the team. Now all of a sudden you look up and he's the leader of the team, right? And now they're about to have a Pass Rush Summit named after him. I thought that was really cool, and again, shows a lot of respect that the league in general has for one Max Crosby. Also, another event that happened over the weekend involving the Raiders involved their assistant GM, Champ Kelly. He actually held a camp called Champ's Camp, and it had to do with high school kids from across the Las Vegas area. So Bonanza High School, Clark High School, Durango High School, and Valley High Schools were all represented at the Raiders facility. Over 200 kids there. And he was so happy to put on this camp. And really what it is, the breakdown of it is the Champ Camp strives to instill the values of commitment, humility, attitude, motivation, and poise through sport-specific skill instruction and delivering messages on life skills and the importance of making good decisions. And this is something that he is very, very passionate about. He's been doing it for quite a while. I actually had an opportunity to catch up with him on Saturday at the Champ Camp, right around the end of the Champ Camp, and just kind of get his thoughts on the whole process. We're here at Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center with Assistant GM Champ Kelly at Champ Camp. What does this mean to you? This is a big deal. All these high schoolers out here having an opportunity to be out here on the field.
Well, this is extremely important, to me. We started this camp in 2010, to give back to, kids and families who are in need of encouragement and support. And so to be able to come here to the place that kind of has hugged and embraced my family,
right,
and to give back to the kids of this community is significantly important to me. This camp is Champ Camp, but it's not Champ's Camp.
Right.
It's not about Champ Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
It's about commitment. It's about humility, attitude, motivation, and poise. And so if we can instill these values to these campers these next couple of days, it's extremely big and important for all of us.
You mentioned you started this back in 2010. Why was it so important for you to get involved and do this, you and your family?
Yeah. When I was growing up, I didn't have the opportunity or the means to be able to go to a camp like this. So my wife and I, we started Heart Power in 2010 to be able to give back to the kid who has a passion for the game, has a passion to do right, but doesn't have the means. And so to have these coaches and players and staff here to serve as models. Right. So these campers can know, hey, listen, I can grow up to be, the next Michael Mayer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's significant and that's big. And to see our coaches who, they get paid to do this with the professional players, but they have the same level of passion and even more intention in doing it with, these students from around this community.
And it's so important to be able to let these kids see it in front of them, right? And to almost taste it and feel it. The coaches were telling us when they got here, the kids started looking around and just were in awe. Jaws were dropped because of this facility.
I've learned over the years that modeling is the best form of teaching.
Right.
I can tell you to do as I say, but if I'm not doing it, it's hard for you to believe that you can do it.
Right.
And so we're intentional about, making sure we got high character people that are surrounding these kids so they can, have the side conversation about, how'd you handle this adversity in your life?
Mm-hmm.
And they can talk through it right now. We have speakers like Dwayne Joseph and Brandon Jurgen come and talk to these kids about, choosing correct friends and the relationships that you make.
Right.
Being like how character is important about, how character is important to us as an NFL program in acquiring players. And so, there's a lot of talent across the country.
Right.
But what separates you is your integrity, your character, your dependability. And so we're stressing these types of, things today to try to help these players be the best that they can be.
What has been the reaction that you've seen personally just from some of the players that have come in here and just running around right now having a good time?
Well, I think it's excitement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm loving the attitude. We all know that your attitude dictates your aptitude. And you can see the smiles, you can see the energy from these kids, but you can see the smiles and the energies from these coaches.
Right.
And that's what's contagious. It's not about us in this moment, It's about them, and I think that's the most important thing.
What I really appreciate is the fact that it's a Saturday morning and they're occupied. They're here doing something. They're not at home trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my afternoon? It gets them focused, keeps them in the right spot.
Yeah, no, that's important. I told these kids earlier that the game of football, that you will never do more for the game of football than the game of football would do for you.
Right.
And so if you're going to invest your time, if you're going to work hard, you're going to build lifelong relationships with this game.
Yeah.
That's what carry you through the entirety of your life. Somebody's going to find a best friend today. Somebody's going to find a teammate. Somebody's going to encourage somebody. Somebody's going to hold somebody accountable, and that's how leadership is developed, and that's how this world is ran.
Right. And the football, it can create lifetime relationships forever.
Like football saved my life.
Yeah.
That's why we're on this football field right now. And so anytime I get a chance to give back, that's not what I do. That's who I am.
Right. It's a big difference.
And it's a big difference. Like this is not something that I want to do to kind of get my name in the paper. No, like this is what I have to do. This is my purpose. And it's more important than any title than any other title that I have.
Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate you doing what you do in the community. I appreciate what's going on, and these kids obviously appreciate it as well.
And I really appreciate you guys. Y'all take care.
So there you go, Champ Kelly, assistant GM of the Silver and Black. And I'll tell you right now, I don't know how long he's going to be the assistant GM of the Silver and Black. I had an opportunity to catch up with him at the Combine. Any chance I get to catch up with him, it's always really good, and you can hear that he obviously knows what he's doing. He's going to be a GM of a team sooner rather than later, and I just think that the Raiders are blessed to have him as part of the mix, along with Dave Ziegler, along with everyone else in the Raiders front office. But Champ Kelly is one that gets it, and just being able to give back to the community like he was, and he even let it be known in that little interview that, hey, it's not about getting my name out there. It's not about any of that other stuff. It's about giving back to the community and the fact that he's been doing it as long as he did. So I thought that was really cool, and it's always great to catch up with Champ Kelly, even if it's only for a few minutes. Coming up in segment number 2, we're going to talk about Josh Jacobs. What is his value? He's holding the franchise tag, $10 million. He hasn't signed it yet. We'll talk about it coming up in segment number 2 after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And I don't know how much you've been paying attention to the NBA Finals. I've been all glued. It might be done after tonight. It just might be done after tonight because it's Game 5, and right now Denver's up 3-1 on Miami. So I thought that Denver was going to win in 6, but they're going to try to close it out tonight. But even with that being said, it's still the perfect time to make a fast break to FanDuel. All the new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500, which is up from $1,000. That's right, $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. You could bet on series MVP. You could bet on average if the Joker's going to get a triple-double average throughout the course of the series. There's all kind of different ways to bet on the NBA, on the NHL, in golf, baseball, whatever you want to do, FanDuel has got you covered. No better place to bet on the finals than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get that no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into the conversation about running back Josh Jacobs. He put out a cryptic tweet over the weekend and had some fans kind of flipping out and getting panicked and getting concerned that maybe he's not going to sign the franchise tag. Maybe he's not going to be playing with the Silver and Black this year. I do not believe that at all. I'll just go ahead and say that off top. I definitely believe he'll be playing with the Raiders. The question is it going to be a one-year deal, the $10 million franchise tag, or are they going to get a long-term deal done? They have till July 15th to work out that long-term deal. But the tweet he put out, sometimes it's not about you. We got to do it for the ones after us, and then just kind of put the shrug in the shoulders emoji as well. And, of course, he's talking about the running backs in general. And really, the running backs, the devalue of them is almost criminal in the NFL. But I get it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like the way that they're devalued, but I understand. I mean, it's such a physical position. They have so many touches, and every time a running back gets a big-time contract extension, you kind of see them fall off a cliff after a couple years. Like, they, more times than not, never get to the end of that contract. And what I mean by that, and it's funny, Rich Eisen from the Rich Eisen Show has been covering the NFL for a long time, put out a tweet as well when Dalvin Cook was released from the Minnesota Vikings. And we talked about this on the show the other day. I felt like this doesn't help Josh Jacobs in any way get a multi-year deal done with a guy like Dalvin Cook out there on the open market. But Rich Eisen tweeted out, I honestly can't believe the running back position has reached a point where a 1,000-yard rusher, 4 straight years with 52 touchdowns, gets released at age 27. So that was from Rich Eisen. And the thing about it is there's some big-name running backs still out there available. Dalvin Cook probably being the biggest name. Kareem Hunt's out there. Leonard Fournette's out there. Zeke Elliott's out there. Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs both have the franchise tag from the Giants and the Raiders. Neither one of them has signed the deal yet. So there's those. Those guys are all out there. But let's look at the guy who most recently was released as Dalvin Cook. I had a lot of people hit up the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line and say, you don't need Josh Jacobs. You can get a running back anywhere. Look, Dalvin Cook's available. You can go get Dalvin Cook if you want to. And really, when I crunched the numbers and looked at it, Dalvin Cook and Josh Jacobs are pretty similar. And think about this. In 2020, Dalvin Cook signed a 5-year, $63 million deal, $28 million guaranteed, $15 million signing bonus, and he was released prior to the 2023 season. And he's right now currently 28 years old. So think about that. 5-year deal signed in 2020. It's not even the 2023 season, and he's already released from Minnesota. So, again, it goes back to what I was saying about these running backs sign contracts. More times than not, they're not even going to complete it or get close to completing their contract. But let's look at Dalvin Cook's numbers, and then we'll look at Josh Jacobs right now. And again, Josh Jacobs is holding the $10 million franchise tag. He's unsigned with it, and he's only 25 years old. Remember that. He's only 25, where Dalvin Cook is 28 and has been in the league since 2017. But let's just take the last 4 years, since that's how long Josh Jacobs has been in the league, 2019 to 2022. Let's look at the last 4 years for Dalvin Cook. In 2019, he played 14 games, had 1,135 yards, 13 touchdowns, 4.5 yards a carry, 250 attempts for the season. Again, 14 games. 2020, 14 games, 1,557 yards, 16 touchdowns, 5 yards per attempt average, 312 attempts. 2021, he played in 13 games, had 1,159 yards, 6 TDs, 4.6 yards per carry average, and 249 attempts. And then in 2022, 17 games, 1,173 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4.4 yards average per attempt, 264 attempts. So what does all that mean? Well, that's a grand total of 1,075 carries over the 4 years for one Dalvin Cook. 5,024 yards, 43 touchdowns, 4.6 yards attempt per average in 58 games. Again, he's been in the league since 2017 and has had a total of 1,282 total carries, 73 career games. So, again, I said that the value of the running back is going down as they get more carries, as they get more burn, as they get more wear and tear on their bodies. So let's look at Josh Jacobs 2019 to 2022 and see how similar he is to Dalvin Cook, who, remember, signed that 5-year, $63 million deal, $28 million guaranteed, $15 million as signing bonus. And I'm assuming 3 years later, a long-term deal for one Josh Jacobs would look like that, but obviously a little bit more money and a little bit more guaranteed money on it as well, as it's a couple years removed. But 2019, Josh Jacobs played 13 games, had 1,150 yards, 7 touchdowns, 4.8 yards per attempt, 240 attempts on the season. 2020, 15 games, 1,065 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3.9. His average dipped a little bit, just under 4 yards, and had 273 attempts. 2021, 15 games, 872 yards. This was his down season, right? He just didn't have that great of a season in 2021 for the Silver and Black, but he had 9 touchdowns and still averaged 4 yards a carry on 217 attempts. And then 2022, when he led the league in rushing, 17 games, 1,653 yards, 12 TDs, 4.9 yards per attempt, almost 5 yards a carry for Josh Jacobs in 340 attempts, which is a ton of attempts, 340. So what does that mean? 1,072 carries over the 4 years. Dalvin Cook, as I mentioned, 1,075 carries over 4 years. Josh Jacobs had 4,740 total yards in those 4 years. As I mentioned, Dalvin Cook, 5,024. So, 250, less than 300 yards more than Josh Jacobs in that 4-year period. Josh had 40 touchdowns, and Dalvin Cook had 43. Dalvin Cook averaged 4.6 yards in those 4 years. Josh Jacobs, 4.4. And Dalvin Cook played in 58 games in those 4 years. Josh Jacobs played in 60. So, one, I don't want to hear anybody talk about Josh Jacobs and his availability, right? Because he's available. I always say that he really hasn't missed as many games as people think. Yes, he gets up and he's banged up, and you can see him kind of limping here and there, but he's always out there and he's always available. His rookie year, he missed 3 games. Next year, he only missed 1 game. Next year after that, 2021, 1 game. In 2022, he didn't miss any games at all. So, where is his value at, right? I mean, at 25 years old, you have to feel like he's probably going to be able to go strong for at least, 2 years, 3 years? So he's not going to get a 5-year deal. That's not going to happen. You just kind of know that that's one of those things that's not going to happen, a 5-year deal for a running back. It's just unrealistic at this stage of the game. But what about maybe a 4-year deal, 2 years fully guaranteed, and maybe an option to get out of it after that second year? I mean, he's only 27 years old at that stage of the game. Why not? Right? I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. I'm looking at like a 4-year deal, 2 years fully guaranteed or whatever. Just have that guaranteed money up front, and then be able to have the option, the team option, to get out of it in that third year if you want to, if you think he's falling off the cliff, as Dalvin Cook at 27 years old, 28 years old, is now a free agent. So, again, you kind of know what the market is. Around 27, 28, 29 years old, they're not looking at running backs as that guy anymore. And, look, the Raiders have a couple other running backs in Zamir White, Britton Brown, Amir Abdullah. Of course, he's a different style running back. But they don't have to give him 340 attempts like they did in 2022, right? They could limit it to, 275, 280 and still have a very productive season. I don't think that Josh Jacobs in 2023 is going to dip under 1,000 yards. I just think that he's really starting to hit his stride. So, yeah, the $10 million franchise tag, it'd be great if he signs it, but I understand what he's saying when he puts out that tweet that sometimes it's not about you. We got to do it for the ones after us. That's about the running back position and the fact that it's so devalued. So I think that the Raiders should look at about a 4-year deal. And again, most of it's going to be front-loaded, 2 years most likely, in my opinion, and then everything after that is kind of gravy, whatever they decide he earns and he can hold on to, or they decide to move on from him. But the one thing I know about the Raiders and the fact that they want him back and have shown the faith that they want him back is the fact that they agreed to change his number, right? I mean, he's changed his number to number 8, and he doesn't have a contract, which is unusual. Normally, they don't do a move like that until the contract is signed. So I do feel like that they believe everything is going to get worked out, whether it's a 1-year deal, the franchise tag deal, or it's a long-term deal. But they did change that number. So that's what makes me feel really confident that he'll be playing with the silver and black in 2023. But Josh Jacobs, Dalvin Cook, there's not much difference between those two guys, right? I've had people call in and say, oh, Dalvin Cook's a better running back than Josh Jacobs. Not really. They're very similar, right? And the only thing is, in the last 4 years, Josh Jacobs has played in more games. Dalvin Cook's had more touchdowns, only by 3, but he's played in more games and he's had a few more yards, less than 300 more yards than one Josh Jacobs. So, again, very similar guys. I think that you could look at that deal that Cook signed in 2020 and probably say that that's reasonable, but I just don't see a 5-year deal being signed by any running back these days, just with the such a low value that they have on the running back position, which is a shame. Hopefully one day it gets turned around and they start to get money, or maybe they change some of the contract situations where the running backs can get their contract, get their money a little bit earlier. I don't know. Something's got to change, because it just seems like these guys run them into the ground and then say, okay, we're done with you. We'll go get another guy in the 4th or 5th round. There's special guys in the league, and I do believe Josh Jacobs is a special running back. You saw what he did in 2022 with the Raiders, not only on the field but in the locker room. I've said it before when we've had callers say it's time to move on. The dude is so much more than a running back. But right here, we're just talking about the value for him and the rest of the league. That's all I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Coming up with segment number 3, what are your thoughts? Your calls and texts, 707-654-4693. This is the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. How about we start off with a call from JT from the 561. He's calling a real quick call about why he's a Raider fan. Here he is, JT from the 561.
Hey, Q, this is JT from the 561. Just wanted to respond to the text about why we're Raiders fans, and just want to give a quick little shout out. My dad's from the Bay Area originally, so grew up a Raiders fan. Didn't really get into football till I was about in high school, and from there I was big on history, and so you kind of learn about the Raiders' history, and it's a rich history, man. So it's that history, all the Raider greats, and it just makes you fall in love with the team, and it never looked back since. So anyway, just want to shout out Raider Nation. Let's go Raiders. Again, this is JT from 561. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for the call, my man, and the history is rich for sure, right? It's always goes back to family. Somehow, some way, family's influenced somebody into becoming a Raider fan, and it always goes back to the history of the silver and black. I'm hoping that at some point the Raiders start making new history, right? They start making new legends, because, man, every time I get to the facility and I see the legends and I realize how old they are, I keep thinking, okay, when's the next crop of legends, Raider legends, right? Of course, C. Wood is always one that we always go back to, but, man, there hasn't been too many guys that you're going to look back, 10, 15 years from now and say, man, that guy's a legend, right? The Raiders need to start producing some more of those legends. So, the young Raider fans, as we've been talking about, have, someone to hold on to and get excited about, like I get excited about Charles Woodson. JT, thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Raider Will out the 816. Said, what's up, fam? Raider Will out the 816. I got a question about O'Connell. What do you see or hear from him? I remember hearing when Patrick Mahomes was still sitting behind Alex Smith that in OTAs and training camp, the other players and coaches could see and know that he was going to be the dude sooner rather than later. So is there a kind of a buzz for Aiden? He's getting more reps since Jimmy G is still rehabbing. So is he showing those flashes of greatness in practice? Thanks, Q, for the content. Thanks for all the hard work. That's Raider Will out the 816. And, we don't get to see that much, right? When we're out at OTAs or mandatory minicamp, we don't get to see a ton. But he looks the part right now. it's hard to judge a guy in June. It's hard to judge a guy in shorts and a T-shirt. We'll start to get a better idea of what he looks like in training camp, and then we'll all get a better idea what he looks like when the preseason comes up. It's just so hard to judge these guys right now. Like, everybody looks good right now. Hell, if I was out there, I would look good, right? just running it and looking the part, I would look good. Hell, on the Raider Roundtable, when I had a football in my hand, I almost looked like I knew what I was doing, right? I mean, if you check that out on YouTube, I held a football for about 3.5 hours, maybe almost 4. I looked the part. I ain't playing worth the salt, but I was out there and I looked like I knew what I was doing. So everybody looks good in June, including me. So thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Got a call from Wine Country Raider. He's calling to talk about Josh Jacobs and what he believes he brings to the team and why he's so valuable. Here he is, Wine Country Raider.
What's up, Q? It's your boy Wine Country Raider, and I'm just calling in talk about Josh Jacobs real quick. I hear people calling in and saying that they'd be okay if we moved on from him, and he had his best year this last year, and he'll never top that. I just think that people are undervaluing him as a human on the team, as a teammate, as a leader, as a player. I mean, how many games did he save us? He saved us with big runs. He saved us with big first down runs. It's not the touchdowns and everything. It's in the yards. It's like the first downs, on third down and stuff like that won us. And what he does on the sideline, the way he talks to the O-line, the way he talks to the players is just insane. And whenever you listen to other, news outlets or, sport outlets where they're talking about running backs, they never even bring up Josh Jacobs, and he led the league in rushing. It's like he's like an afterthought, and I just think that he's so undervalued with everybody. And the Raiders I don't see them. They're going to re-sign him. We need to re-sign him. He's a leader, and he's part of the glue that's going to keep this team together and push us to the next level. Zamir White is going to be behind him, and I think we should just rock with Jacobs and let him mentor Zamir and see what Zamir can become behind Josh. That's all I got. Wine Country Raider out.
Thanks so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And yeah, man, I'm with you as far as what Josh Jacobs brings to the team, man. He brings and means so much. He was the guy that established their identity last year. And for the, first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, they had no identity, had no idea who they were going to be. And then all of a sudden, Josh Jacobs said, don't worry about it. I got this. I'll show you what the identity is going to be. And that's who he was. Not only that, he was a hell of a dude in the locker room. When the Raiders were going through adversity, he didn't have any problem stepping up and saying something. He didn't have any problem talking to anyone else. The offensive line, hey, guys, we'll get it together. Don't worry. Keep encouraging them, keep teaching them. Zamir White's told me how much Josh Jacobs has helped him as well, and you think that, okay, this is the guy that's been brought in to basically take your job, but you're coaching him up. So that's, Josh Jacobs means a lot to this organization. And again, I believe that he'll be there in 2023. I'm interested to see if he gets a long-term deal done before that July 15th deadline, or if he ends up just signing a one-year deal and then all of a sudden they got to run it back and try to do it again next offseason as well. Thank you for that call. I do appreciate you. Just got time for a couple more. How about a text from Eric in Martinez, California? So what's up, Q? I was listening to Friday's show, and I heard the birthday shout-out for his son's 18th birthday. That shout-out made me feel some type of way because I was listening to it, and I was making an errand between the hospital and my house. My wife just gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I just wanted to say that caller made me tear up for the first time in a decade because I'm now looking forward to the next 18 years of Raiders games with my son and having that kind of special bond over something as simple as sports. The Raiders might not always be good, but they always have a special place in my family. That's Eric and Martinez, and that's awesome. That's really a cool message right there. And, when I believe it was Raider 360 who gave the birthday shout out to his son, that's really cool for him to be able to shout him out on the podcast and they listen to the show together. But to know that it had an impact also like that is even better. Right, to know that all of a sudden now Eric's thinking about, hey, man, the next 18 years watching games with my boy is going to be great, and that's just kind of what it is. And it kind of goes back to being with the question about, young Raider fans. How do young Raider fans? It always goes back to family. Right. And that's why, my boys were Raider fans, from the jump. Right. There was never a question because they're like, oh, Dad's a Raider fan. So we got to follow in his footsteps. Right. Whether it's right or wrong. But that's what they do. And that's what we do. All right. And so that's kind of the beauty of it. So, Eric, man, enjoy the next 18 years. They'll fly by. Try to enjoy as much as you can. But it's going to be fun. Right. And enjoy all those times that you get to watch Raider games and enjoy Raider games, whether they win or lose with your son. I think that's going to be, like I said, really, really special. So thanks so much for that text. I appreciate you. How about one more call from Tom in Mesa? He's calling to talk about Jimmy G and the Raiders offense and what if it all comes together? Here he is, Tom and Mesa.
Hey, Q, this is Tom and Mesa. Tom Raider, Tom T-Bone Raider, however you want to call it. So what if Jimmy's the guy? So what if Jimmy's our new Jim Plunkett? What if this traveled veteran, injury history, winner for the most part, wins when he's in there? You know, coming from a West Coast system to this system he knows really well, that he started with. You know, the first system that you learn is the one that you retain and you usually branch out from throughout your whole career, you know. Man, we have weapons for days. You know, we have the ability to get open quickly for the fast play action pass with a great running back in Josh Jacobs. He's going to sign the contract. You know he is. You know he's going to play into the franchise tag. He's going to do it. So what if this line comes together and all of a sudden they're amazing pass blockers? What if Brandon Parker comes back and is the right tackle we thought he would be? What if this new guy from the Bills, Van Rowe or whatever his name is, just ends up being a boss and we have an amazing line? What if? That's the question. Positive spin, brother. All right, I'm out. Peace.
Tom, thanks so much for that call. I appreciate you. And yeah, there's a lot of what ifs there, right? And I hate to be that guy. I hate to, well, what if this and what if that? Because, again, you're banking on a whole lot of things going right for your team. And I can't just say that that's what's going to happen. Obviously, Jimmy G is going to be a big question. Obviously, the red zone is going to be a big question. But on paper, in June 12th, yeah, the offense could, if all those things go right, could be awesome, right? I mean, they could be a top 5 offense, no doubt, with all those weapons that they have, you know, from the offensive line coming together for another year and having that continuity, from the wide receiving core to the tight ends. I think they are going to really help out with this offense. And, of course, the running game, right? If that all comes together, then, yeah, hell yeah. It could be a really good offense. But, again, there's a lot of what-ifs that have to come together. Obviously, we'll start to really see it come training camp in preseason. We'll get a little bit of glimpse. Those guys that we mentioned aren't really going to be out there, the big-time players. And then the regular season gets going, man, and it's tough, right? The first 3 out of 4 games are on the road. 2 on the road, 1 back at Allegiant Stadium, then another one on the road. So first 4 games, 3 are away. So that's going to be and tell you a lot about the Raiders season early on. That first quarter of the season will tell you a whole lot. So, Tom, thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Still got a text from Mark. We'll get that tomorrow. Brother Marquise in the 305. Got a call from him, plus a whole lot more. We'll get some more news and notes and see how OTAs, this is the final week of OTAs before they take a break and go to training camp. So we'll talk about OTAs and how that's going. We're supposed to meet with the players and coaches on the 15th, but I really do believe that last day of OTAs is going to get canceled. So we'll kind of see what happens in the meantime, in between time. And, of course, we'll bring it here to the podcast. Maybe on tomorrow's show, I'll play the Von Miller sound from his pass rush summit that he had over the weekend, the one I was talking about in segment number 1. It was really good to hear from Von Miller. I know he's not a Raider, but it was really, really good to hear from him. So maybe we'll have that on the show tomorrow as well. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.